files and
Is that
sort,
right?
yes, and sort the files. We have file cabinets with files. In the writing room, which is on the second level where you and I work, there are files that I have on the floor ready to sort. So when you sort, toss, and file, eventually you come back to the point where you have to go into the files and sort and toss again.
Mm-hmm.
And we also have a storage building that has files. We were informed by our CPA to never dispose of tax records, never. IRS records. Now, there are folks who say get rid of them every 7 years. Our CPA says, nope, hang on to them. Whoa, when you're our age, that's a lot of hanging on.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, sort, toss, file. It's a great thing to do.
We get another pile that we got in one of our bedrooms
Oh, yeah.
are books
Oh yes. Mm-hmm.
like this,
Mm-hmm.
A Boy and Now.
Yes.
And also downstairs, the books are like this.
Mm-hmm. We have, I surmise, books numbering in the hundreds.
I'd say Boy and Now.
We like to read. We like to have resources to go to. But after a while, if you're not careful, the books will crowd you out of your home. And we've reached the point where we need to get rid of some books.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard to do because every book has something to commend itself or it wouldn't be in your library. But we're going to be talking with Dennis Everson. Dennis is a good guy and know how to handle used books. He does it all the time. And he's one of the mainstays in the Acts Ministry and Acts Media Group, and good friend. We'll talk with Dennis, see what we can do about some books. Manage to put them in the right places, to give them to the right people, do something with them that will be helpful. So sort, toss, file, even books. Another thing that we need to do, I think, this time of the year, this happens to be the month of June, so it's spring of the year. It's a good time to remember significant things. I was surprised that yesterday and the day before, which was a weekend, what was missing from the news.
Oh,
Now
what's
we have news almost continually about the Middle East and war or rumors of war. We have news about the Ukraine,
Mm-hmm.
troubled place, Iran and their nuclear program. We have news about Iraq trying to make it without the presence of American troops. News about Syria and their continuing civil war. We get news out of Europe and their economic situation, and the UK and their Brexit, their exit from the monetary system of the European countries, the mainland of Europe, continental Europe. We have news out of South America and Central America, especially those nations that are allowing people to leave their country and head for the United States. We have problems on the border.
I know, but see, when everybody I watch Nat Geo and about smuggling, and all the time they're catching people. Even before COVID, they were catching people coming from very far off countries through different countries to get to South America and come in up through Central and South America
Right.
to get into this country.
Yeah, so they're not all Latinos trying to
No.
get in. Some of them are from the Middle East,
Yes,
and they are following the same path as the Latinos. So
exactly.
that's in the news. North Korea, from time to time, is in the news because they are kind of a belligerent type nation. The U.S. dollar's in the news. There's all kinds of things that they're just wearing us out about the news. COVID and all the discussions about Wuhan, the lab,
Fauci.
and all that. Now, guess what was missing from the news? June the 6th, 1944. June the 6th was yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
June the 6th, 1944 was D-Day.
Oh, wow.
77 years ago, the United States and their allies, under the leadership of General Dwight David Eisenhower, stormed the beaches of Normandy to eradicate the world of Nazism, Hitlerism. Let me back up. What set the stage for June the 6th?
Pearl Harbor?
Hmm?
Pearl Harbor?
No, I'll get to that. We're going to take a break, and after the break, I'll come back and tell you what set the stage. Break time.
Enter the talent contest at Axe Fest. $10 entry, $50 to winner. Axe Media Group.
Your sandwich was so limited.
Your sandwich had a lot of butt.
All right, we're back. And as promised, I will have some information now for you that set the stage for D-Day. What happened was Hitler came to power in Germany in 1933. He promised people a better way of life and universal health care.
Oh, that sounds familiar.
No, doesn't it?
Just like this year.
So he gradually gained power using the brown shirts, and you can read this for yourself in the history book, if you can find the history book that hasn't been altered.
Exactly.
And then eventually he had quite a night of the long knife when it was called, when they murdered the brown shirts so that they would not be competition when he consolidated his power. And as a result,
Oh, wow.
25 plus sovereign countries were overrun by Nazism and under their control. And then he had a partner in crime in Italy. His name was Benito Mussolini, and Mussolini was a fascist. He was in power in Italy and invaded Ethiopia, took charge of that, and they had a partner in crime in the Japanese warlord, and Tojo was his name, and they had invaded China in the 1930s, 1937, I believe it was, and had taken over basically all of the Pacific, South Pacific in particular, with the exception of Australia, which was in danger. The United States did not get involved officially in the war, in World War II, until the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, our naval base there, December the 7th, 1941. When that happened, then our president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, went before Congress and asked for a declaration of war against the Empire of Japan and against Germany and the Axis. They called them the Axis powers, Germany, Japan, Italy. And declaration of war was decreed. United States went to war. The first draftees were training in this country for the military with wooden rifles because we had a very small army and no munitions built up. I mean, they were marching, learning to march, carrying wooden rifles. But someone had said, one of the Japanese admirals had said when they struck Pearl Harbor, he said, "I fear we have awakened a sleeping giant." And they had, because the United States, with its productive ability, was able to quickly arm itself, thanks to the fact that we had a great industrial base. For those of you who want to find fault with big companies like General Motors, you need to realize that General Motors played a major role in helping keep this country safe from Hitler and Tojo and Mussolini, because the tanks were powered by 2 Cadillac engines. Overnight, I was a kid, I remember when they stopped making new automobiles for civilian use. All of that production went to make tanks, military vehicles, artillery pieces, etc. The whole country, all of the industry, shipbuilding industry, automobile industry, factories, all were geared for war production. Everything else was rationed. We had in my hometown of Moberly, Missouri, Brown Shoe Company, a factory, probably 3-4 stories high, big old brick building. And they converted over to making nothing but military boots, combat boots, and hired a lot of people. Anyway, that sets the stage then for finally, after 3.5 years, the United States is ready. The Allies are ready. General Dwight David Eisenhower is ready. And they put together quite an invasion force to hit Normandy, which is along the coast. It's a coastal area of France, to make their way into the continent of Europe to defeat the Nazi forces. Here's what was involved: 13,000 aircraft. Think about that. That's a lot of airplanes, 13,000 airplanes, 5,000 ships. That's a lot of ships. 5,000 ships. I can't imagine such a thing. There was on board those ships 195,700 Navy personnel on those ships.
That's just Navy. That's not including Army or anybody else.
That's right. Just the
Ooh.
Navy operating those ships.
Oh, my goodness.
Then there was the coastline that they were landing on. Wasn't just a little bitty piece of ground. It was 50 miles long. The beachhead was 50 miles long, that coastline.
Man.
100,000 troops were prepared after hearing Dwight Eisenhower speak to them in various ways. They were ready to go ashore, knowing that some of them wouldn't reach the shore, some would reach the beaches, many would die. But 100,000 went to make the effort along this 50,000-mile coastline. Here were the beaches that were involved. Utah Beach, Point du Hoc Beach, Omaha Beach, Gold Beach, Juno Beach, and Sword Beach, 6 landing places. The one that's most famous, I guess, would be Omaha Beach. It's been written up and made movies about it and so forth. But 100,000 men trying to go ashore, preceded by 225 Rangers, Army Rangers, to try to take out enemy gun emplacements at the top of a sheer cliff, a tall cliff. They had to throw grappling hooks up there and pull themselves up by rope. As they were going up, they were being met by machine gun fire, firing down on them. And when one man would fall, another would take his place. If one rope got cut, they'd go to another rope. They were persistent. Finally, out of all of those, only 90 survived to get to the top to take out those gun emplacements, which made the landing a little less dangerous, but still very dangerous.
Out of 90 men, out of how many died?
Out of 225.
Oh, doggies.
So that means 115 men died trying to scale those cliffs. And one has to think that those men, their spirits, their souls, that lost their lives that day, some of them in the water before they got to the beach, many on the beach. A total of 10,000 were killed or wounded. All of those men now are gone that were in the that made it ashore. I guess they're all deceased now. But of those that lost their lives before the victory was secured, they must know. I believe a merciful God has let them know that they had a righteous cause and they won. So their dying was not in vain. So 100,000 troops, 10,000 of them wounded or killed. Over the next 2.5 months following that, there were 2 million more men who arrived and went ashore. 2 million more. So that was the story of D-Day, 1944, 77 years ago, that this past weekend went untold by any of the major news media or any observances. And it's a shame that we are losing our history if we're not careful. Well, I have some great stuff to talk about when we come back after this break.
Guess who cleans for less? Who? Me? No. Him.
How do we get back into the workforce?
I got you.
Who was that woman?
Well, that was a brief break. We're back. Anyway, the story of D-Day has been handled. Now then, let's go to some more items at the on the bucket list. Okay. Well, you want to say something more?
Yeah, I want to ask you, tell everybody from your perspective what your mom went through, what she could buy or she couldn't buy.
Oh, during those World War II days?
That's right.
Okay. Well, if you think because of the pandemic, there was a real problem with the shortage of such a thing as toilet paper, I called it the paper caper. In my day, back then, toilet paper was not in common usage. Really wasn't. They substituted. I won't go any further with that. But indoor plumbing wasn't in common usage. We had outdoor facilities. I won't go any more into that. If you'd like to know more about it, send me an email. I can tell you about it.
What about the grocery store?
Now, the grocery stores. Grocery stores were very small, and they handled only certain what we call staples. Didn't have the huge variety you have today. So we would go to town on Fridays, rather Saturdays, to do our trading, it was called. That was an old term when farmers used to bring stuff in and trade it at the trading post for other supplies. So we would go to town to do our trading, in this case, trade some money and some ration stamps for goods, because during World War II, things were rationed. For instance, we didn't have margarine then like we have now. People used lard, and lard came from rendering down the meat from hogs. It was hog fat, and lard was rationed. Lard was used in certain explosives, you see. Lard was rationed. Sugar was rationed. For one thing, it was hard to get sugar from the Pacific, and shipping lanes were very occupied and dangerous. Nazi U-boats, submarines were sinking ships that would have been carrying supplies. So supply lines were very disrupted. So sugar was rationed. Even flour was rationed. Gasoline was rationed. You couldn't buy new tires. Everything was rationed. And so my mom was very, very good about making things stretch and go the extra mile. For instance, we raised our own chickens. And there would come a time when it was chicken killing day. That was an experience. We all pitched in to help, and which meant that after we killed the chickens, either by wringing their necks or chopping their head off with a hatchet. I was not good at wringing necks. I used a hatchet because I was a little kid, and we'd have them. They'd be flopping around all over the yard. When they quit flopping, we'd pick them up, and we had a kettle with a big fire under it, hot water. Dip them in there, and then begin pulling the feathers off. And then you were down to where we're left with pin feathers. And you rolled up old newspapers, put them on fire, and used that to singe the pin feathers off. I never liked that smell. smell of wet feathers burning. Anyway, from that point on, some other members of the family would gut the chickens and process them and so forth. Now, we had our own eggs most of the time. And not only chicken eggs, but duck eggs, because my mom also kept some ducks. She raised a huge garden and she home canned things. And for many years, these things were kept on a back porch that she had my dad close in. But she wanted a cellar, and Dad wanted a cellar. Dad didn't like storms. He was afraid of, he called them cyclones, tornadoes. And so in agreement, Dad dug a cellar. Before the cellar, when the potatoes were dug, Dad would put a big mound of straw in the backyard, big thick pile of it, put the potatoes on there, cover them with more straw, cover them up with dirt, bury them with dirt, and they would keep through the winter. Same way with carrots, turnips, etc.
So they didn't go bad or anything?
No. They knew how to take care of them. And I can still see my mom go out there and brush away snow and dig down past the dirt and the straw and get out potatoes. That
They wouldn't get moldy, wet
No.
or moldy?
No. No.
Wow.
Oh, well, there was a lot of ways that people survived before they had deep freezers and refrigerators. We didn't have a refrigerator. We had an ice box.
Mm-hmm.
If you were blessed, you could buy a 50-pound block of ice, put it in the top of the ice box, and it kept things sort of cool. Not like refrigerators of today. Folks, I'm old enough that I, at the age of 13, worked delivering ice from an ice truck. We called it shagging ice.
Mm-hmm.
We had a rubber apron that we put down our back. It had a pocket on the bottom to catch the drippings so we didn't get water on somebody's floor. And we had an ice pick we carried in the holster to chip the ice, to break it up from a 300-pound piece down into 50-pound, down into 25-pound. And we had ice tongs, big steel tongs had hooks on it. You hook in there and pick it up and put it over your back. And that's why we had the rubber apron down our back, etc. Climb up 2 or 3 flights of stairs to old Miss So-and-so's house and raise the top of her ice box and put her ice in there. And how did we know she wanted ice? She had a placket, a cardboard thing she put in the window with hands on it. And the hands would either say no, or it would say 25, 50, whatever. Yes, she wanted ice, how many pounds?
Wow.
That's how we knew. Anyway, those were primitive days, but we didn't think they were primitive then. We thought we were right uptown,
Mm-hmm.
So that's the days of D-Day. Now, let's get back to this bucket list thing, because on the bucket list, sort, toss, and file. After a while, you have to sort, toss, and file the files. Another thing I like to do that helps me keep my bucket list is keep a date book. Now, this little pocket date book isn't anything that I purchase. You don't have to buy these things. If you do business with anybody these days, most of them have a calendar or a date book to give you. Every year we get these from our financial planner. And it has significant dates in it, holidays and the calendars for 2 years and maps of the world and all kinds of interesting things. What I like to do is sometime on Saturday evening, I like to sort of make a little list of what I'm going to do the next week, so that when Monday morning comes, I don't have to spend time making a new list from scratch and take a look at my book and see what I had in here. I can either add or subtract from it, so that it simplifies things. But on your bucket list, become a list maker, become a goal setter, become a person that has a schedule. Make a schedule, keep the schedule. If there's an old saying in business, if you don't plan to succeed, you're planning to fail. It's just that simple. And it's amazing how many people wake up and say, Where did last week go? Or, where did last month go? Well, what happened the last year? Well, the summer's gone. What happened with the summer? What did I do? Well, it's easy. You get to be my age, 86, and sometimes you look back and say, whoa, where'd all those years go? So it's a good thing to keep a schedule. Make a schedule, keep it, revise it, stay on top of it. If you don't manage your time, somebody else will manage it for you. You can be certain. It's like your money. If you don't manage your money, somebody else will manage it for you. That's for sure. So that has to do with the bucket list. Something else to do. Sort, toss, file, make a schedule, and keep it. Well, we have another break coming up. Wonderful. Can't wait to hear what's on this break. We'll be back in a moment. We're back. Nice little break there. And it's the bucket list with Paul and Nancy Collins on axmediagroup.com. Axe Television Network is carried by Axe Media Group. And we invite you to contact us through axmediagroup.com, the website. And I promise you, I will write you back. There was a famous evangelist, Nancy, many years ago, black and white TV. And he would say, write me. He'd give his name, this city. That's all the address you need. And he says, I will write you back. Well, I will write you back. You send me an email, I will answer. If you send an email and you don't get a response, check with the Axe Media people and find out what happened to the transmission, because sometimes things do get lost between the writer and the recipient. And I do want to communicate with you. Well, Nancy, back now to this thing about the bucket list. Another thing that I know some folks put off doing, especially older people perhaps, but not just older people, but some of the younger ones. We have a tendency to put off our communication skills. Like, well, I'll get around to it. You know, it's not a major thing. Nowadays, communication is a major thing. If you don't communicate, you don't know how to call 911. They make jokes about people. Some guy the other day made a joke about he was feeling pretty bad, so go ahead and dial 911. Dial 911 and wait. Did you get that? If you got it, send me an email. So, but you've got to know how to communicate these days. That's for sure. What do you do in the case of an emergency? Who do you reach out to? What do you do about some of the messages that come through on this thing? I noticed that I get some messages from people, and it's not the real people. I know these folks, and somebody was trying to. Well, it was late last week. Someone was communicating with me like it was an old friend of mine from back probably 60 years ago or more. And I asked her about her husband, and she says, oh, he's doing great and so forth. And I said, then well, that's nice. I said, I text back, I said, when did he die? And she texts back, you got to be kidding. That was the end of that conversation, because he'd been dead for years. So whoever that person was trying to fool me realized that they weren't fooling me. I had one of those this morning, supposed to be from an old classmate of mine. That person who was communicating didn't have the right answer, so I knew it wasn't my classmate. Anyway, don't be intimidated by the fact that this little thing here called a cell phone can have phony messages coming over it. Become good at communication. Know a phony when you see it on this thing. Likewise with email. Don't open every email that comes your way. There are a lot of people who have made mistakes and done that. I did it back a number of years ago. a dear friend of mine, really my best friend at the time, he was always forwarding something to me by email that he got from his brother, who got it from somebody else, who got it from somebody else. The thing was, we would say, germ ridden. It was full of viruses. Is that I guess that's the plural for viruses. Anyway, I kept telling him, don't send those to me. They're full they're contaminated. And so, because every time I'd get one of those and open it, not every time, but 2 or 3 times to be exact with you, I opened them. My computer got infected. I had to call a repairman back then. It was about $150. Well, frankly, I think it was like 110 plus something.
This is really bottom line. That's like a sexually transmitted disease.
Yep, exactly. So finally, I told him, I'm not opening your email anymore. I'm just not doing it. And I didn't because it got too expensive. Nowadays, they've got this cleaned up a little better, but I noticed some of the major websites, major news media, I mean, mainstream news media, they'll have their information come through an email. You can click on it, open up, and then if you want to read one of these things down below, look carefully because it may have the words in the left-hand corner, AD, which means it's an advertisement. You may think you're getting inside information, background information on Tom Selleck. He's very popular among older people, so movie star, TV star, or someone like him. And you open that up. If you continue to follow the clicks, all of a sudden your computer freezes up because on the tail end of all of those clicks, there's somebody probably in Russia or China or Korea or San Francisco, Los Angeles, or next door somewhere who's hacking in, and they're out of just plain meanness, they lock up your computer, which means then that you eventually have to just shut it down and then do a restart, and that takes some time and effort. So what I'm saying to you, on your bucket list, make it a point to get a little more education about communication, whether it's involving your cell phone or your computer. Now, here's a good reason why, not just for protection, but because this is the way information is being transmitted these days. Have you noticed that the yellow pages of the phone book are almost non-existent? Have you noticed that there's so many things that you can get? Those of you who watch television, you know that there's delivery now, that delivery services we didn't have even a year and a half ago. There are things you can do. They're called apps, APPS, that are on the phone or on especially on your cell phone, but even on the computer for various services. It pays to learn. I'm not making this very clear, Nancy, but what my bottom line is this: computers are here to stay. Cell phones are here to stay, at least in the foreseeable future until they come up with something better. It's certain they're not going to go backwards. Newspaper business is done. A lot of things are done. But no matter what your age, learn about communication. Older people, I suggest, if you're being a little hard-headed about learning about cell phone and texting or about email and computers, get over it and become a student. The younger ones, those of you who think you know everything, I suggest you learn how to spell. I suggest you learn how to punctuate. I suggest that you increase your vocabulary beyond certain words that you've made acceptable.
You mean the four letter words?
Yeah, there's a bunch of those, and there's some 3-letter words too, and some others. They don't make your conversation all that appealing.
No, all they do is put yourself down by what you say and how you say it.
So on your bucket list, way down there someplace, you probably said, I'm going to improve my communication skills, or I'm going to learn more about the computer, or I'm going to learn more about my cell phone. I'm going to get better at it, or I'm going to start checking my email. I talked to a lady the other day on a very, very important matter, and I said, you've got my phone number. It's showing up on your phone. And she didn't realize what I was saying. I said, well, here it is, write it down. I said, now, my email is, you got a pencil? And she had to find a pencil, write it down. That's my email address. And I said, if you send me an email, I'll have your address. But just in case it doesn't come through, what is your email address? And she said, I have one. I don't know what it is. It's in my phone. Let me see if I can figure out how to find it and stay on the line. I thought it was going to take forever. This is a woman with a responsible position, employment-wise. We were dealing with a very serious matter. Just because she's in her 50s is no excuse, really, to not be more adept with cell phones and computers, email. And then she said, I'm not online very much. Well, then you're out of touch very much. Mm-hmm. If you're not online very much, you're out of touch very much. Please reach down in your bucket, pull out that thing that says communication. That means communication going out and communication coming in. Let's get better at it. Nancy, that ties in with being able to find some news. For instance, if I hadn't been on my computer, I wouldn't have had all this information about D-Day because it didn't come over television. So there are lots of avenues of communication. We need to use all of them. We need to be able to use good language, speak well, write well, listen well, communicate well. That's what we need to do. I want to wrap up our bucket list for today by reminding folks how important it is to pay attention. If you don't pay attention, you're going to pay money. It's that simple. And you may still pay money even if you pay attention. But every 3 seconds, someone is a victim of cybercrime here in the United States. Think about that, every 3 seconds. So how do you guard against it? The only way you guard against it, you have to know some stuff through this or your computer. The newspaper is not going to teach you how to avoid cybercrime. You want to go out and buy a $39.95 book that you won't read to understand cybercrime? Become a communicator who communicates out and lets communication come in. You can avoid a lot of this cybercrime. That means that there's 20 of them every minute. That's 28,800 cybercrimes a day in this country alone. That's 10,512,000 cybercrimes every year. Well, that's the end of my bucket list for today. I'll be back next Monday, so will Nancy, and we'll have another bucket list, and we'll try to ring your bell with what we have to offer. Until then, thanks to Matthew Pearson for being our faithful engineer for today, and all of those people who had the spots during our break time. And we'll see you next week.